Standing in the cramped quarters of the research vessel Endurance, he gazed out at the alien world that hung before them like a jewel against the cosmic night. Terran 4's, a garden world. Lush, green, perfect for human colonization, if the initial surveys proved accurate. Just soil samples, he murmured to himself, his breath fogging the reinforced viewport. We're in out. Nothing complicated. But Ethan Cross had been to 17 different worlds in his career as a xenogeologist. He'd learned to read the subtle signs, the way light bent through an atmosphere, the unnatural symmetry of coastlines, the too-perfect distribution of land masses, and everything about Terra North screamed one thing: inhabited. Dr. Cross? The voice belonged to Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, the mission's military liaison. Young, eager, still believed the universe played by rules. We're ready for planetary insertion. Ethan turned from the viewport, his weathered face scarred by radiation burns from a dozen different suns, showed no emotion. At 53 he'd learned to keep his observations to himself until he had proof. Command didn't like speculation. They liked facts. Copy that, Lieutenant. Prep the shuttlecraft. The Endurance had been humanity's answer to the growing need for rapid planetary assessment. Fast, efficient, lightly armed, a ship designed for science, not war. Because humanity had grown complacent in their corner of the galaxy. 300 years without meeting another sapient species had lulled them into believing they were alone. They were wrong. 47 light-years away from Earth, in the shadow of a dying binary star system, the Hegemony Council convened in emergency session. "The mammals have arrived," announced High Strategist Zergath, his 6 eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the human ship in orbit around Terran 4. His species, the Netherian, had ruled this sector for over a millennium. They did not tolerate intrusion. "Another scouting probe?" asked War Prime Velkara, her crystalline carapace shimmering with barely contained aggression. The Sekahare were the Hegemony's military arm, a species evolved from predatory hive minds who had learned to channel their bloodlust into strategic domination. "No!" Zorvak's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "This is different. They've deployed a shuttlecraft. They intend to land." The council chamber fell silent. Terran Vive was more than just another world. It was sacred, the last remnant of the first species the Hegemony had uplifted before their mysterious extinction. To allow alien contamination of that world would be heresy. "How many ships?" War Prime Velkara's mandibles clicked with anticipation. 1. Crew complement. Minimal. Perhaps 6 individuals. Velkara's laugh was like breaking glass. 6. They send 6 mammals to claim a world we have protected for centuries. She leaned forward in her command throne. "I will enjoy studying their remains." But High Strategist Zorvakth raised a warning appendage. His species had not survived 7 million years of galactic politics through impulsiveness. "Patience, War Prime. We observe first. These humans have been expanding rapidly, too rapidly. Their technology suggests aggressive tendencies we must understand before we act. You suggest we allow them to defile sacred ground. I suggest we learn what manner of threat they represent." Zergath's eyes focused on the display. "Deploy a stealth observation post, full sensor array, and ready the judgment fleet, just in case these mammals prove more troublesome than they appear." Dr. Ethan Cross felt the shuttle's engines vibrate through his seat as they pierced Terran Vort's atmosphere. Through the small porthole he watched alien clouds part like curtains, revealing a landscape that took his breath away. Vast forests of silver-leafed trees stretched to every horizon. Rivers carved through the terrain like glowing veins. The water itself seemed to phosphoresce with an inner light. Mountain ranges jutted skyward in impossible spirals, as if the planet's geology had been shaped by an artist rather than natural forces. "Jesus," whispered Dr. Patricia Hamilton, the mission's botanist. "It's beautiful." "Too beautiful," Ethan muttered, his trained eye picking out the subtle wrongness in the landscape below. The geometric precision of forest edges, the perfectly spaced distribution of lakes, the unnatural regularity of the river systems. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comms system from the pilot's seat. "Coming up on the designated landing zone. Everyone strap in. Atmospheric readings are a bit weird. Oxygen content is higher than expected, but there's something else in the air. Can't identify it. Ethan felt a familiar chill run down his spine. In his experience, weird atmospheric readings usually meant one of two things. Either the planet was trying to kill you, or someone else was already living there. The shuttle touched down in a clearing surrounded by those impossible silver trees. As the engines powered down, an eerie silence settled over the landing site. No bird calls, no insect buzz, just the whisper of wind through alien foliage. Atmosphere's breathable, Rodriguez announced, consulting her readings. Temperature's perfect. Humidity's optimal. It's like someone terraformed this place specifically for us. Ethan was already unbuckling his harness. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. The hatch cycled open with a soft hiss, and the team stepped onto the surface of Tiran 4. The air tasted sweet, too sweet. Like honey and ozone mixed together. Jaichin immediately began collecting plant samples, her excitement palpable as she examined the unique cellular structure of the silver leaves. The photosynthetic process here is incredible, she called out. These plants are converting electromagnetic radiation across the entire spectrum, not just visible light. The efficiency is beyond anything we've achieved artificially. Ethan knelt near the landing site, pulling out his geological sampling kit. But as he pressed the core sampler into the ground, something made him pause. The soil felt wrong beneath his gloved hands. Too uniform, too perfect. He activated his portable analyzer and watched the readouts with growing unease. The mineral composition was flawless, exactly the balance needed for optimal human agriculture. The bacterial count was perfect for rapid terraforming adaptation. Even the pH levels were within ideal parameters. "This is impossible," he whispered. "What's impossible?" Lieutenant Rodriguez appeared at his shoulder, her hand resting casually on her sidearm. "This soil, it's not natural." Ethan's voice carried the weight of certainty born from decades of experience. "Someone engineered this. Someone wanted it to be perfect for human colonization. Maybe we just got lucky?" Ethan stood, his weathered face grim. "Lieutenant, in 27 years of planetary survey, I've learned one thing. The universe doesn't give out lucky breaks. If something seems too good to be true..." A sound cut through the alien air. Subtle at first, like wind chimes, made of crystal, but it grew louder, more complex, until it became unmistakably musical. Structured. Deliberate. The team froze. "That's not natural," Dr. Hamilton breathed, her plant samples forgotten. The music grew closer, and with it came a presence that made every human instinct scream warnings. Something was watching them. Something intelligent. Something that had been waiting. Through the silver trees, shapes began to emerge. Tall, graceful, moving with a fluid precision that spoke of advanced evolution and careful breeding. They wore robes that seemed to shift color with their movements, and their faces, when they finally became visible, were hauntingly beautiful in their alienness. Humanoid, but wrong. Too tall, eyes too large, skin that held an inner luminescence. The lead figure raised what might have been a hand, and the music stopped. "Welcome," it said in perfect unaccented English, "to Tiran 0. We have been expecting you." Ethan's blood turned to ice in his veins, because that sentence meant everything he'd feared was true. This world was inhabited, had been inhabited for who knows how long, and somehow these beings had been preparing for humanity's arrival. "I am Nexaria," the being continued, its voice like wind through crystal formations. "Guardian of this world, keeper of the sacred trust. You have come for soil samples, yes?" Lieutenant Rodriguez's hand moved to her weapon, but Ethan caught her wrist. "Not yet. They needed information." "How do you know our language?" he asked. Nexaria's expression, if it could be called that, shifted into something that might have been a smile. "We have been watching your species for some time, Dr. Cross. Learning, preparing. The soil you seek is ready for harvest." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Ready for harvest. As if they'd been cultivating this world specifically for human use. "But why?" "We're peaceful explorers," Rodriguez said, her military training taking over. "We mean no harm to you or your world." "Harm," Nexaria's laugh was like breaking bells. Dear child, you misunderstand. We do not fear harm from you, we fear for you. What do you mean? But before Nexaria could answer, the sky above them began to darken. Not with clouds, with shadows. Massive. Geometric. The hegemony has found you, Nexaria whispered. And for the first time, something like fear crept into its melodious voice. And they do not share our appreciation for your species' potential. High above Terran 4's atmosphere, War Prime Velkara stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Annihilator. Through the viewports she could see the human shuttlecraft sitting on the planet's surface like an insect waiting to be crushed. Report, she commanded. 6 humans as predicted, her tactical officer replied. They've made contact with the planet's native population. Velkara's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The natives of Terran 4, the ones they called the Terran High, were a peaceful species. Evolved from plant-like organisms, they posed no military threat. They existed only because the hegemony allowed it, and their continued existence served as a reminder of the hegemony's mercy toward lesser beings. Charge the planetary bombardment array, she ordered. War Prime, her tactical officer, hesitated. The native population will be eliminated as well. Unnecessary sacrifice. These humans cannot be allowed to report back to their kind. Their expansion ends here. But before the order could be carried out, a new voice cut through the bridge's communication system. War Prime Velkara. The voice was calm, measured, carrying the authority of absolute power. You will stand down. Velkara's blood chilled. That voice belonged to Overlord Kethzar, Supreme Commander of the Hegemony, a being so ancient, so powerful, that most believed him to be myth. Overlord, she managed. The humans must be eliminated before. The humans will be studied. Alive. I have sensed something in their approach that requires investigation. The connection terminated with a finality that left no room for argument. Velkara stared at the planet below, her warrior's instincts screaming that they were making a mistake. Humans were mammals, deathworlders, according to their intelligence reports. Aggressive, unpredictable. And now they were being allowed to live. She could only hope the Overlord knew what he was doing. Back on Terran Vor's surface, Dr. Ethan Cross found himself in the middle of a first contact scenario that was rapidly spiraling beyond anything in the protocol manuals. The beings calling themselves the Terran High had led the human team to what could only be described as a city, though it looked more like a living organism than any human construction. Buildings that pulsed with bioluminescent veins, streets that felt warm beneath their feet, architecture that seemed to grow rather than be built. Your soil samples, Nexaria said, gesturing to a grove where dozens of perfectly prepared containers waited. Taken from 17 different biomes across Terran 4, each optimized for different aspects of human agricultural needs. Ethan stared at the containers. You've been preparing this for us. For how long? Since your species first began transmitting radio signals into space. We have been listening, learning, preparing this world as a gift. A gift? Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice was sharp with suspicion. Why? Nexaria paused, its luminescent eyes focusing on something in the distance. Because we have seen what comes after first contact. We have seen what the hegemony does to worlds that harbor species with potential. The hegemony, the rulers of this sector. They have governed for millennia through a simple philosophy: compliance or extinction. Your species shows signs that compliance will not be natural for you. Dr. Hamilton looked up from her examination of the city's living walls. What kind of signs? Genetic diversity, technological adaptability, most importantly, psychological resilience. Nexaria's voice carried a note of something like admiration. You are Deathworlders, born from a planet that tried to kill you every day for millions of years. You develop traits that the hegemony finds threatening. Ethan felt the pieces falling into place. You're trying to help us? We are trying to preserve you. This world, Terran 4, is sacred to the hegemony, but it is also strategically positioned at the edge of their territory. If your species could establish a foothold here, we'd have a base of operations. Rodriguez finished the thought, her military training immediately grasping the implications. Indeed. But more than that, you would have allies. The Tarenhai are not the only species the hegemony keeps under their boot. There are others, waiting, hoping for what? Nexaria's expression shifted again, and this time the emotion was unmistakable. Hope, desperate, fragile hope, for someone strong enough to fight back. The words hung in the alien air like a challenge. Ethan looked at his small team, a geologist, a botanist, and a junior military officer, and felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on their shoulders. They'd come for soil samples. Simple, scientific, safe. Instead, they'd stumbled into the opening moves of what could become humanity's first interstellar war. And somewhere high above them, in the cold vacuum of space, the hegemony fleet waited with weapons trained on the world below, unaware that their perfect order was about to be challenged by a species that had never learned how to surrender. Dr. Ethan Cross knelt down and filled the first container with Turan 4's impossibly perfect soil. The analyzer in his hand showed readings that would revolutionize human agriculture, terraform a dozen worlds, and feed billions. But as he sealed the container, he realized he wasn't just collecting samples anymore. He was accepting a declaration of war. The container felt heavier than it should have in his hands, not because of its physical weight, but because of what it represented. Evidence. Proof that this world could sustain human life. Proof that there were aliens in the galaxy, both friendly and hostile. Proof that humanity's expansion had just become infinitely more complicated, and infinitely more dangerous. As if summoned by his thoughts, the sky above them lit up with the distinctive blue-white flare of energy weapons powering up. The hegemony fleet was making their presence known. "They're going to attack," Rodriguez breathed, her hand moving instinctively to her sidearm, a gesture that would have been laughable if not for the desperation behind it. But Nexaria shook its head. "Not yet. They debate among themselves, some wish to destroy you immediately. Others—" It paused, listening to something the humans couldn't hear. "Others wish to study you first." Study us for what? To understand what makes a Deathworlder species so dangerous that entire galactic civilizations fear their expansion. Ethan stood, the soil container secured in his pack alongside a dozen others. Each one contained the future of human expansion into this sector, if they survived long enough to deliver it. How long do we have? Until they reach a decision. Hours, perhaps less. Nexaria's luminescent form began to fade as if it were stepping back into the living walls of the city. "But time is not what you need, Dr. Cross. Understanding is what you need. Understanding of what? Of what you truly are. What your species represents. What you're capable of when pushed to the edge." And with those words, Nexaria vanished, leaving the four humans alone in an alien city, surrounded by the impossible beauty of a world that had been prepared for them by beings they'd never met, while above them a hostile fleet prepared to decide their fate. Ethan looked at his team, at the young lieutenant whose hand hadn't left her weapon, at the botanist clutching samples that could feed worlds, at the silent communication array that would need to transmit their findings back to Earth if humanity was to have any chance of preparing for what was coming. "Dr. Cross?" Rodriguez's voice was steady despite the impossible situation. "What are your orders?" Ethan Cross had spent his career studying dead worlds, cataloging mineral compositions, filing reports, living a quiet life in service to human expansion. But as he stood in that alien city, with enemy ships darkening the sky above and the weight of potential war pressing down on his shoulders, something fundamental shifted inside him. He was no longer just a scientist. He was the first human to make contact with a galactic civilization. The first to learn that humanity was not alone. The first to discover that their expansion had put them on a collision course with forces beyond their imagination. "We're not leaving," he said quietly. "Sir? We're not leaving." His voice grew stronger with each word. "We're going to learn everything we can about these hegemony forces. We're going to understand their weaknesses. We're going to figure out how to fight them." He turned to face his team, and they saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something hard, something dangerous. "And then we're going to take this world." Because Ethan Cross understood something that the hegemony in all their millennia of dominance had never grasped. Humanity didn't just come from a death world. Humanity was the death world, and they were about to learn what happened when you cornered the apex predators of a planet that had spent 4 billion years trying to kill them. The message burst from Terran 4's surface traveled at the speed of light toward Earth, carrying with it the most important transmission in human history. Doc Cross had managed to upload their findings through the shuttle's emergency beacon before the hegemony's jamming field could fully establish itself. 47 light-years away in the halls of the Terran Colonial Authority, Fleet Admiral Jackson Pierce read the decoded transmission 3 times before the full implications hit him. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "First contact. Hostile aliens. A trap centuries in the making, and 6 of his people stranded on an alien world with enemy warships in orbit above them." Admiral, his aide Commander Lisa Park, stood at attention beside his desk. "Your orders, sir." Pierce leaned back in his chair, his weathered face reflecting the weight of command. 30 years in the colonial fleet had taught him that decisive action often meant the difference between life and extinction when you were this far from home. "Alert the 6th Fleet. Full mobilization. I want every ship we have combat ready within 72 hours. He paused, staring at the tactical display showing humanity's known territory. A tiny bubble of light in the vast darkness of the galaxy. "And get me a line to Earth Command. The politicians need to know that we're at war." "War, sir?" "The transmission says they were offered alliance by the native species." "Commander, when you're dealing with a galactic empire that's been in power for millennia, there are no neutral positions. You're either allied with them, or you're their enemy, and they just discovered that humanity won't be easily controlled." Back on Terran 4, the standoff continued. The Hegemony fleet maintained position in high orbit while Overlord Kethsar deliberated on the fate of the human landing party. For 48 hours, the ancient being had studied every scrap of intelligence available about humanity's expansion. What he discovered disturbed him. "War Prime Valkara." His voice resonated through the command ship's communication systems. "Report to my chambers, immediately." Valkara found the Overlord in his meditation sphere, a massive chamber filled with swirling energy patterns that allowed him to interface directly with the hegemony's vast information networks. He hung suspended in the center of the sphere, his form so ancient and modified by millennia of technological enhancement that he barely resembled his original species. "Overlord," she said, bowing in the traditional manner. "Tell me, War Prime, what do you know of extinction events?" The question caught her off guard. "Overlord? Natural extinction events. The forces that eliminate entire species from their homeworlds. Asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, ice ages, gamma-ray bursts." The energy patterns around him shifted, displaying images of dead worlds. "In the galaxy's recorded history, we have encountered 17 species that survived such events on their homeworlds. Do you know what they all had in common? They were resilient. They were extinct within a century of achieving interstellar flight." The patterns shifted again, showing the rise and fall of civilizations. They expanded too quickly, spread too thin, lost cohesion as a species. The transition from planetary to galactic civilization destroys most survivors of extinction events. Valkara felt a chill run through her carapace. "Most, Overlord? But not all. One species in our records survived both planetary extinction events and the transition to galactic expansion. They became conquerors, empire builders. They spread across hundreds of worlds before we finally managed to contain them." "What happened to them?" "We exterminated them. Every last individual. Scoured their homeworld clean. Because we learned too late that survivors of multiple extinction events develop a psychological trait that makes them incompatible with peaceful coexistence." "What trait?" "They never accept defeat, ever. Push them to the edge of extinction, and they become more dangerous, not less. Corner them and they'll take half the galaxy down with them rather than surrender." The implications hit Valkara like a physical blow. The humans have survived 7 separate extinction events on their homeworld. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions. Each time they adapted, survived, grew stronger. The Overlord's form pulsed with agitation, and now they're expanding into space with a speed that suggests they've learned to maintain species cohesion across interstellar distances. "Then we destroy them. Now, before they become a threat. War Prime, the Overlord's voice carried a note of something Velkara had never heard before. Fear. They're already a threat. The question now is whether we can contain them without triggering the psychological response that makes them so dangerous. And if we can't, then we pray to whatever gods still listen that we can evacuate enough of our civilization to distant galaxies before they hunt down every last one of us. On Terran 4's surface, Dr. Ethan Cross was beginning to understand the true scope of what they'd stumbled into. Nexarea had returned with more of the Terran-Thai beings whose names sounded like music and whose knowledge of galactic politics spanned millennia. The hegemony controls 14 star systems directly, explained Vorthine, an ancient Terranhai whose luminescence had dimmed with age. But their influence extends across nearly 100 systems through client species and tributary arrangements. They are not evil, as you might understand it. They simply believe that order must be maintained at any cost. And they see us as a threat to that order, Rodriguez observed. Your expansion patterns suggest you will not accept tributary status, added Salandra, her musical voice carrying undertones of both hope and fear. Most species slow their expansion once they encounter the hegemony. They accept limitations in exchange for protection and trade rights. Humans don't slow down for anybody, Dr. Hamilton said quietly. It's not in our nature. Indeed, and that is both your greatest strength and your most dangerous weakness. Nexarea emerged from the city's living walls. Its form more solid than before. The hegemony has spent 3 days studying your species' history. They have reached conclusions. What kind of conclusions? The kind that end with the sterilization of your homeworld. The words hit the humans like a physical blow. Ethan felt his blood turn to ice as the implications sank in. They're planning to attack Earth? Not immediately. First, they will eliminate you here. Then they will trace your trajectory back to its source and determine the location of your primary colonies. They will offer humanity one chance to accept tributary status, complete surrender of expansion rights in exchange for survival. And when humanity refuses, total war. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward, her military training taking over. How long before they move against us? Hours, perhaps less. The Overlord has finished his deliberations. Ethan looked around at his small team. 3 people and himself against a galactic empire. The odds were impossible. The situation was hopeless, which was exactly when humans became most dangerous. Nexarea? He said quietly. You mentioned that other species are waiting for someone strong enough to fight back. How many species? Dozens. Possibly hundreds. The hegemony rules through fear, but fear can only last so long when hope is offered. And if someone hypothetically were to demonstrate that the hegemony could be defeated, the Terranhai's luminescence pulsed brighter, rebellions would ignite across the galaxy. Ethan nodded slowly. Then we need to give them that demonstration. Dr. Cross, Rodriguez said carefully, we're 4 humans with small arms against a space fleet. Even if we had support from the Terranhai, the math doesn't work. The math never works when humans are involved. Lieutenant, that's what makes us so dangerous. He turned to Nexarea. I need to know everything about hegemony technology. Their weapons, their ships, their tactics. Everything. Dr. Cross, surely you're not planning. I'm planning exactly what you think I'm planning. His voice carried a hardness that none of them had heard before. We're going to take that fleet. In the command ship high above, Overlord Cathzar had reached his decision. The humans represented a threat that could not be contained through conventional means. Their psychological profile suggested they would fight any limitation on their expansion, and their technological adaptability made them capable of rapid military advancement. They had to be eliminated before they could report back to their species. War Prime Velkara, he commanded. Begin orbital bombardment. Eliminate all life on the planet's surface. Overlord, the native population, is acceptable collateral damage. The humans must not survive to warn their kind of our existence. Velkara felt a moment of regret for the peaceful Terranhai, but orders were orders. Charging orbital bombardment array. All ships target the human landing site. But as the hegemony ships powered their weapons, something unexpected began to happen on Terran 4's surface. The planet itself was responding. Dr. Hamilton had been studying the living architecture of the Taranhai city when she noticed the change. The bioluminescent veins running through the buildings began to pulse faster. The ground beneath their feet started to vibrate with a deep rhythmic thrumming. "What's happening?" she called out. Nexarea's form blazed with sudden light. "The planet is awakening." "What do you mean, awakening?" "Terran 4 is not simply inhabited by the Taranhai," Vorthang explained, his ancient voice carrying overtones of reverence. "We are part of it. Symbiotic. The planet itself is a living organism, and we are its nervous system." Rodriguez spun around, her tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. "You're saying the entire planet is alive? More than alive, aware, intelligent, and it has been listening to our conversations about the hegemony threat." High above them, the first energy beams lanced down from the hegemony fleet. But before they could reach the surface, something impossible happened. The planet's magnetic field shifted, twisted, formed geometric patterns that deflected the incoming energy away from populated areas. The beams that should have sterilized the landing site instead carved harmless spirals through empty atmosphere. "Impossible," Belkara whispered from her command bridge. "Planetary magnetic fields don't move that fast." "Unless the planet is controlling them," her tactical officer replied, his voice filled with disbelief. But that was only the beginning. Across Terran Vianboth's surface, the silver forests began to change. Trees that had stood peacefully for centuries suddenly extended root systems that emerged from the ground as massive organic structures. Not buildings, weapons, biological mass drivers that began launching projectiles toward the ships in orbit. "Evasive maneuvers," Velkara commanded. But the projectiles were unlike anything in their databases. They moved like living things, adjusting their trajectories to match the ship's movements. And when they struck, the first impact against the Annihilator's shield sent feedback through the ship's energy systems. Not damage infection. The projectile had somehow introduced a biological virus into their computer networks. "Engineering reports system contamination," her tactical officer announced. "The virus is rewriting our targeting algorithms." On the planet's surface, Ethan Cross watched the impossible battle unfolding above them with growing understanding. The Taranhai hadn't just prepared Tarananvit as a gift for humanity, they'd prepared it as a trap for the hegemony. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. Nexaria. "Centuries. We knew that eventually a species would emerge that could challenge the hegemony's dominance. We prepared this world to give them the tools they would need." "And you think we're that species?" Dr. Cross. Nexaria's luminescence pulsed with something like laughter. "Your people call this collecting soil samples. You've managed to turn a routine scientific survey into the opening battle of a galactic war. If that doesn't prove you're the species we've been waiting for, I don't know what would." Above them, more hegemony ships were falling to the planet's biological defenses. But Ethan knew this was only the beginning. If they wanted to truly challenge the hegemony, they needed more than one living planet. They needed humanity's most dangerous trait, the ability to turn any situation into a weapon. "Nexaria," he said, "how many other worlds have your people prepared like this one?" 17, scattered across hegemony space. "And how many species are waiting for a signal to rebel?" "Hundreds." Ethan smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn since landing on this world. "Then let's give them a signal they'll never forget." He turned to Rodriguez. "Lieutenant, I need you to get a message to our ship. Tell them to broadcast on all frequencies, standard human emergency protocols." "What message?" "Tell them that Dr. Ethan Cross, sent to collect soil samples on Terran Vor, has just declared war on the hegemony. Tell them that any species willing to fight for their freedom should watch the sky above Terran Vor in the next 6 hours." "Sir, we can't fight an entire galactic empire with—" "Lieutenant, we're not fighting an empire." Ethan's voice carried the absolute certainty of a man who had finally found his purpose. "We're starting a revolution." And above them, as hegemony ships continued to fall to impossible biological weapons, War Prime Velkara realized with growing horror that they had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't discovered humanity. Humanity had discovered them. And now, Across the galaxy, species that had lived in servitude for millennia would learn that the hegemony could bleed. The war was about to begin. But first, Dr. Ethan Cross had soil samples to collect. Because he'd been sent to do a job, and humans always finished what they started, even if it meant taking on the gods themselves. The biological bombardment from Terran 4's surface intensified as the planet's defenses fully awakened. Massive organic cannons erupted from what had appeared to be peaceful meadows, launching projectiles that moved with predatory intelligence toward the hegemony fleet. War Prime Velkara watched 3 more of her ships succumb to the viral infections, spreading through their systems. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being brought down by what appeared to be overgrown plants. "Status report," she demanded. 40% of the fleet compromised, her tactical officer replied. "The biological agents are rewriting our navigation systems. Half our ships can't even maintain orbit. Then we withdraw, regroup. Call in reinforcements." "War Prime," another voice cut through the chaos. Communications Officer Kixaran sounded shaken. "We're receiving transmissions from across the sector. The human emergency broadcast is being interpreted as a call to rebellion." "What?" 17 systems have gone dark. Colonial worlds are attacking hegemony installations. Client species are declaring independence. Koixran's voice grew quieter with each word. "It's spreading faster than we can track." Velkara felt the foundations of her reality shifting beneath her feet. One human landing party on one backwater world, and the entire galactic order was collapsing. How is this possible? Her question was answered by a transmission from the planet's surface, not from the humans but from the Terran High themselves. "War Prime Velkara," Nexaria's musical voice filled the command bridge. "You face beings who survived 7 extinction events on their homeworld. Did you truly believe that 4 of them stranded on a single planet would simply surrender? This world will be sterilized. Your rebellion will die here. Will it? Look around you, War Prime. How many of your ships still answer your commands? How many systems still acknowledge hegemony authority?" The truth hit Velkara like a physical blow. They had been so focused on the immediate threat of 4 humans that they'd failed to consider the broader implications of their actions. Every moment they delayed in eliminating the humans was another moment for the rebellion to spread. "Even if you destroy us," Nexaria continued, "the signal has been sent. The galaxy knows that humans do not yield. That knowledge alone will topple your empire." Velkara turned to her communications officer. "Contact the Overlord. Tell him we need immediate authorization for galactic-scale suppression operations." But when the connection established, Overlord Kethsar's voice carried a weariness that spoke of eons of failed strategies. "War Prime, I have been monitoring the situation. The rebellion has spread to 43 systems. Our intelligence networks report that several client species have formed military alliances. We are facing the largest coordinated uprising in our recorded history. Then we crush it, all of it. Immediately. With what forces? Half our fleet is compromised. The other half is scattered across the galaxy trying to contain rebellions that started the moment the human broadcast began. We lack the military capacity for galactic pacification." Velkara's world tilted. The hegemony had ruled for millennia through the simple principle that resistance was futile. But now, thanks to 4 humans with soil collection equipment, that principle lay in ruins. "What are your orders, Overlord?" The pause stretched for long minutes before Katsa replied. "Withdraw from Terran 4. Let the humans leave. Monitor their expansion but do not engage directly." "Overlord, we have learned too late what the ancients knew, War Prime. Some species cannot be conquered. They can only be survived." As the hegemony fleet began its withdrawal from Terran 4, Dr. Ethan Cross stood in the landing clearing, surrounded by containers of alien soil that would revolutionize human agriculture. But the dirt was no longer the most important thing they were bringing home. They were bringing proof that humanity could fight gods and win. "Dr. Cross," Lieutenant Rodriguez approached with the shuttle's communication array. "We're receiving a message from Earth. Fleet Admiral Pierce reports that the 6th Fleet is en route to Terran. How long until they arrive?" 6 months at maximum hyperspace velocity." Ethan nodded. "Tell the Admiral that by the time he gets here, we'll have allies waiting for him. Allies? The hegemony made one critical error in their analysis of human psychology. Ethan explained, his eyes fixed on the alien ships retreating into space. They assumed we were dangerous because we refused to surrender. But that's not what makes us dangerous. We're dangerous because we inspire others to refuse surrender as well. And across the galaxy, on worlds that had known only subjugation for centuries, beings who had never dared to dream of freedom watched the skies and whispered a new word: human. 6 months later, the Turan system had become the beating heart of the largest rebellion in galactic history. Fleet Admiral Jackson Pierce stood on the bridge of the UN's Defiance, humanity's newest dreadnought, and marveled at the sight before him. Dozens of ships filled the space around Terran 4, not just human vessels, but alien designs he'd never seen before. Species that had remained hidden from the hegemony for centuries had emerged to join what the galactic networks were calling the Death World Coalition. Admiral, Commander Park approached with the latest intelligence reports. The Velthori have committed their entire fleet to the coalition. That brings our total force strength to, she paused, double-checking the numbers, approximately 4,000 ships. And hegemony strength. Intelligence estimates 12,000 ships under direct control, with another 8,000 from client species. Though loyalty among the clients is questionable given recent events. Pierce nodded grimly. Even with their alien allies, they were outnumbered 5-1. In conventional warfare, those odds would be suicidal. But humans had never fought conventional wars. Contact Dr. Cross. Tell him I'm ready for that briefing, he promised. Minutes later, Ethan Cross materialized on the bridge via holographic projection from Terran 4's surface. 6 months had changed him. The quiet scientist had been replaced by something harder, more focused. A man who had started a galactic war and intended to finish it. Admiral Pierce. Ethan's voice carried across the bridge with absolute confidence. Welcome to Terran 4. I trust you've had a chance to review the strategic situation. Dr. Cross, I've read your reports. What you've accomplished here is remarkable. But we need to discuss realistic objectives. The hegemony has ruled this galaxy for millennia. They have resources we can barely comprehend. Admiral, may I ask you a question? In human history, how many times have superior numbers and resources guaranteed victory? Pierce considered the question. Point taken. But we're talking about a galactic empire here. Yes? An empire built on the principle that resistance is futile. An empire that has never faced an enemy that actually grew stronger under pressure. Ethan's image leaned forward. Admiral, the hegemony's greatest strength has become their greatest weakness. They've ruled for so long that they've forgotten how to adapt to real threats. Explain. They've been fighting the same war for thousands of years, suppression operations against scattered rebellions. They have no experience with coordinated resistance. No protocols for dealing with an enemy that refuses to accept defeat. And most importantly, they have no understanding of how Death World psychology affects military planning. Pierce was beginning to see where this was leading. You're suggesting we can use their inexperience against them. I'm suggesting we can do more than that. I'm suggesting we can turn their entire philosophy of governance into a weapon against them. Before Pierce could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. Admiral, the tactical officer's voice cut through the noise. Hyperspace signatures detected. Multiple contacts. Jesus Christ, it's massive. Through the viewports, space itself seemed to tear open as the largest fleet in recorded galactic history emerged from hyperspace. Hegemony ships in formations that stretched beyond the horizon. Thousands of vessels, each one capable of sterilizing a planet. At the center of the fleet, a ship so large it dwarfed even the human dreadnoughts. The flagship of Overlord Quetzar himself. Communications, Pierce ordered. Get me a channel to all coalition ships. Channel open, sir. All vessels. This is Admiral Pierce. Form defensive formation around Terran 4. Prepare for engagement. But even as the coalition fleet moved to intercept, Pierce knew they were looking at impossible odds. The hegemony had brought enough firepower to shatter moons. Dr. Cross, he said to the holographic projection, I hope you have something in mind because conventional tactics aren't going to cut it here. Ethan's response sent chills down Pierce's spine. Admiral, conventional tactics. Assume that your goal is to win a battle. Our goal is to win a war, and wars aren't won by destroying enemy ships. Then how are they won? By destroying enemy certainties. On the bridge of his flagship, Overlord Cathsar prepared for what he believed would be the final confrontation with humanity's rebellion. 6 months of careful planning had brought the largest fleet in hegemony history to this moment. War Prime Velkara, he commanded. Status of all battle groups. All ships report ready. Overlord, we have overwhelming numerical superiority. The coalition fleet cannot possibly withstand our assault. Cathsar's ancient form pulsed with satisfaction. Begin the attack. Eliminate all hostile vessels. Leave no survivors. But as the hegemony fleet advanced, something unexpected began to happen. The coalition ships didn't form defensive lines. Instead, they scattered not in retreat but in patterns that made no tactical sense. What are they doing? Velkara demanded. Unknown. War Prime. Their formation appears random. That was when the first surprise hit them. The human dreadnought Defiance suddenly accelerated directly toward the center of the hegemony formation, not firing weapons but broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Admiral Jackson Pierce of the Terran Colonial Fleet. His voice echoed across every ship in both fleets. To all hegemony client species, you have one opportunity to withdraw from this battle. Anyone who remains will be considered an enemy of free worlds everywhere. Velkara laughed. Does he believe threats will... She was cut off as massive sections of the hegemony fleet suddenly broke formation. Client species vessels that had served the hegemony for centuries turned away from the battle, refusing to engage. What's happening? Cathsar's voice carried notes of disbelief. Approximately 30% of our fleet is withdrawing, Velkara reported, her voice shaking. Client species are citing neutrality agreements with the coalition. Impossible. Our treaties with those species date back centuries. But the withdrawals continued. Species that had never shown signs of disloyalty were abandoning the hegemony at the moment of greatest need. And suddenly the impossible odds were becoming merely difficult ones. How? Cathsar whispered. His answer came from an unexpected source, a transmission from Taran Fort itself. Overlord Cathsar. Dr. Ethan Cross's voice filled the command bridge. You've spent 6 months trying to understand how 4 humans started a galactic revolution. The answer is simpler than you think. Human, you face the full might of the hegemony. Surrender now, and your species may yet survive as tributary vassals. Overlord, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't a battle between your empire and our rebellion. This is a referendum on the future of galactic civilization. What are you talking about? Every ship in your fleet represents a choice. Serve tyranny or choose freedom. Fight for the past or build the future. And thanks to 6 months of coordination with coalition diplomats, every client species in your fleet knows that this choice exists. Cathsar felt the foundations of his empire crumbling beneath him. Been possible. Our client species are bound by treaties, by fear, by centuries of conditioning. Overlord, you've ruled through fear for so long that you've forgotten the most basic truth about sentient beings. Given a real choice between slavery and freedom, most will choose freedom. We just had to show them that the choice was real. As if summoned by Cross's words, more sections of the hegemony fleet broke away. Not retreating, joining the coalition. Species that had served the hegemony for generations were switching sides in the middle of the battle. This is treason, Velkara snarled. All ships open fire. Destroy the traitors first. But when she gave the order, something else happened that had never occurred in hegemony history. Her own officers hesitated. War Prime, her tactical officer, said quietly, "Those ships contain billions of sentient beings who are choosing freedom. Are we really going to massacre them for making that choice?" For the first time in her military career, Velkara felt her absolute certainty waver. The hegemony had always fought against clearly defined enemies: rebels, pirates, aggressive expansionists. They had never been asked to fire on beings whose only crime was choosing self-determination. War Prime, the tactical officer, waited for orders that didn't come. And in that moment of hesitation, Overlord Kethsar realized that Dr. Ethan Cross had been absolutely right. Wars weren't won by destroying enemy ships. They were won by destroying enemy certainties. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Not because of its scope or violence, but because of its restraint. Hegemony forces found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to target civilian vessels, that offered quarter to surrendering ships, that treated prisoners according to ethical standards the hegemony had forgotten existed. And every act of human honor and coalition restraint was broadcast across the galaxy in real time. Admiral Commander Park reported from the Defiance's bridge, "We're receiving surrender requests from hegemony ships faster than we can process them." Pierce watched as another group of alien vessels broke from the hegemony formation and requested permission to join the coalition. "How many are we up to?" Coalition forces now outnumber remaining hegemony loyalists, 3-1. And the Overlord's flagship? Still operational. Still refusing to surrender. Pierce nodded. He'd expected as much. Ancient beings like Kethazar didn't abandon power easily, which meant the war's final act would have to be personal. "Get me a channel to Dr. Cross." "Channel open, sir." "Dr. Cross, it's time." On Terran 4's surface, Ethan Cross stood in the same clearing where he'd first collected alien soil 6 months earlier. But now, instead of scientific equipment, he was surrounded by representatives from dozens of species beings who had chosen freedom over security, uncertainty over oppression. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all classifications," he said, his voice being broadcast to every ship in the system. 6 months ago, I was sent to this world to collect soil samples. Instead, I found something more valuable than agricultural data. He gestured to the diverse gathering around him. I found proof that the desire for freedom is universal, that the courage to fight for self-determination exists in every sentient species, and that sometimes all it takes to topple an empire is for someone to stand up and say no. In space above them, the remaining hegemony ships began to power down their weapons. Not in surrender, but in recognition of a truth that had taken the galaxy millennia to learn. Some battles couldn't be won with force. Only Overlord Kithsar's flagship remained defiant, its weapons trained on the Coalition fleet. "Overlord," Admiral Pierce's voice carried across all frequencies, "your empire is finished. Your client species have chosen freedom. Your own officers question your orders. Stand down." Kethsar's response came as a burst of energy weapons, not at the Coalition ships, but at the planet below. If he couldn't preserve his empire, he would at least eliminate the humans who had destroyed it. But the energy beams never reached their target. Terran 4's planetary defenses activated one final time, not to destroy incoming fire, but to absorb it. The planet itself drank in the Overlord's fury and transformed it into something else entirely. Light. Pure, brilliant light that spread outward from the planet's surface in expanding waves. Light that touched every ship in the system, every being in the galaxy, every consciousness capable of recognizing what they were witnessing. The light of freedom itself, visible across the stars. And in that light, Overlord Kethsar's ship simply stopped. Its weapons powered down, its engines went silent. Not destroyed, but transformed. The ancient being who had ruled through fear for millennia finally understood what Dr. Ethan Cross had been trying to tell him. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun. Months later, in what had once been the hegemony's capital system, delegates from hundreds of species gathered to sign the Galactic Freedom Accords. The document established principles that seemed simple but had taken the galaxy thousands of years to recognize. No species had the right to rule another. No being could be denied the opportunity to determine their own fate. And no empire, no matter how ancient or powerful, could stand forever against the simple truth that freedom was stronger than fear. Dr. Ethan Cross sat in the delegation chamber, a container of Terran soil on the table before him. The samples that had started this entire revolution, the dirt that had toppled God. "Dr. Cross?" The voice belonged to Nexaria, who had become the Terran High Representative to the new Galactic Council. "Your thoughts?" Ethan smiled. The same quiet smile he'd worn when he first realized what they were really fighting for. "I'm thinking about a mission briefing I received a year ago. Collect soil samples. Simple survey mission. Nothing complicated. And instead we learned that sometimes the most important discoveries aren't the ones you're looking for. He gestured to the diverse gathering of beings around them. We came looking for dirt suitable for human agriculture. We found soil rich enough to grow an entire galactic civilization. Outside the chamber's viewports, ships from dozens of species worked together to build something that had never existed before. A truly free galaxy. Not ruled by any single empire, but governed by cooperation and mutual respect. It would be messy. It would be chaotic. There would be conflicts and disagreements and challenges that no one could predict. But it would be free. And sometimes Dr. Ethan Cross reflected as he sealed the soil container one final time, freedom was worth fighting gods for. Even if you'd only been sent to collect samples,